From Toronto to Tokyo, and from Thonia to Syrinx, this is The Basement, your companion to the Ready Player One novel. Join our hosts each episode for complete chapter breakdowns and deep dives into the pop culture references through a series of challenges and homework assignments. The Basement is the Ready Player One podcast for people who love things. And now, please welcome Albert and the rest of the Gunchers for this week's episode. Hello, Gunchers. You are in The Basement. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 10, or 0010. Yet another does not return. We are back again, and I'm going to bring in I've got two hosts with us this week, and none other than Mr. Will Wilkins, and welcome back, Mr. Neal Sega from the Game Wizards episode that we did just, was about a year ago now. So, yeah. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Will, we'll talk about that helicopter there in the background in a little bit.
Sweet. Sweet.
Neal?
I got to say, so this is my first time I'm meeting Neal, but we've got some nerd out time we need to do at some point beyond this because we've got a lot of the same interests.
It can't be contained. It just can't be contained.
In fact, we did an hour of the show before this even went live.
That's right. Yeah. So, and Neal, thanks for being here. We were having a very serious conversation before we came on the air, and I thought to myself, you know what, we're going to be talking about some really old stuff. And I thought, who out there, no, I'm just kidding, but who out there, we've got some really good video games, some old text-based games. We're going to be talking about some old equipment, some old computers, and in your background, I thought would lend itself really well to this show. So
it's just because I'm old. That's what it is.
Well, that's what I meant. My background.
It's a crime.
No.
Yeah. If you had 7 more hosts, you'd be subject to these discriminatory laws.
That's right.
You would have to stop this age discrimination.
All right. Well, let's. We're going to jump into this. I have one quick thing that I want to just talk about. I don't really have a whole lot here, but I just want to. I'm so excited. But Who's the Boss is coming back. Did you guys hear about this?
Absolutely.
I did not.
Yeah. So Tony Danza, Alyssa Milano have both signed on. Dan Farah, who's actually, I think he's the talent manager for Ernie Klein. I think he also represents Tony Danza. So I follow him because of Ready Player One. But he's been working at this for like 2 years now, trying to get something going here, I think. But yeah, so that show's coming back. I think they brought everybody. They're going to bring everybody back. But the actress who played Mona, she unfortunately passed away last year or 2 years ago. But anyways, so I'm pretty excited that they're bringing Who's the Boss back. It just feels like a show that, like, I remember watching that show very vividly.
Oh, I know.
During the early,
I know what you're saying.
mid-'80s. Yeah, Alyssa Milano.
Oh, yeah, Alyssa Milano's all grown up, and she's moving back into the house as a single mom. So there's your setup.
Yeah, and I was thinking, like, who's going to replace Mona? And I thought, well, wait, what if they take Tony Danza and make him the Mona of this series? I think that would work out really well, but who knows? We'll see.
I don't know. Maybe they take Rhea Perlman as her mother-in-law or something crazy.
No, she's still around.
She's still acting. So she was on. Yeah, I think last season she was on. The Goldbergs.
Oh, yeah.
So they did an episode of the Goldbergs that had like the whole cast of Cheers on it. It was awesome.
Oh, really? No, I haven't seen that one. But yeah, anyways, we'll see how that plays out here. Hopefully it'll be out here very soon. Okay, so we are going to talk about Chapter 10, but I thought I'd go ahead and do the quick recap of Chapter 9. And let's start by Chapter 9. As Parzival leaves the Tomb of Horrors, he is met by the infamous Artemis, a fellow Guncher, and is someone he has a secret crush on. After exchanging contact cards, Artemis discovers Parzival has acquired the copper key and is on his way to the first gate. The two spend time talking about how they'd spend their winnings should either of them win. Just before Parzival leaves Artemis, he gives her a hint so that she can make one last attempt or make another attempt at beating a Sararak at a game of joust. So for this chapter, Chapter 10, after leaving the Tomb of Horrors, Parzival teleports to the planet of Middletown, a planet complete with 256 identical copies of Halliday's hometown of Middletown. He makes his way through this small and rural town to Halliday's home, where he gets wind that Artemis has gained the copper key. Once he arrives at Halliday's home, he fires up an old TRS-80 computer and plays Dungeons of Daggorath in hopes of the first gate revealing itself. After a few attempts, Parzival beats the game and discovers the image of a wrought iron gate on the wall where a War Games poster was once hanging. He unlocks the gate with a copper key and jumps in through an endless field of stars. So and there's a lot. I mean, this episode this chapter had a lot of pop culture references to be honest. But before we get into those, let's talk about the narrative. And the first thing that came to mind when I was reading this was this idea that he had been in the Tomb of Horrors, and it was kind of like a no communication zone. And he mentions that was probably done intentionally so people couldn't cheat and give each other hints and clues, that sort of thing. But when he comes out, he's suddenly barraged by all of these messages that he'd been missing from, news alerts and everything else. And he got me thinking, like, I've been on, you guys are well traveled. I'm not. But whenever I am on a plane, it feels like once I come off of airplane mode, I just get hit with all kinds of stuff. My phone goes crazy. It stops working for a little while, trying to get caught up. So I just had this really casual question about there. And Neal, maybe I'll start with you, but can you recall a time that you had like a major event that happened that you were just completely unaware of, either because your phone was off or you didn't have a cell signal or anything like that?
Yeah, it was actually coming out of a scout hike into the mountains, right? So I'm involved with the Boy Scouts. We lead a troop of young men up into some really high elevations for several days. And it was actually kind of peaceful, not getting messages.
Yeah.
But once we came back and came into range, then all of a sudden the thing just starts going off. And, this individual is sick, or, we've got real trouble down here at work, whatever it is. It's just like, well, there went all the peace and calm that I had experienced in the mountain. My Zen-like attitude had dissipated.
Yeah. It was all queued up, just waiting for you when you returned.
That's exactly right.
Well, what about you? Any major events that happened while you were away that you missed out on?
I think anytime you travel transatlantic, you're going to go through that. It's, most of us business travelers, now calm down, people, aren't going to wait until we actually touch down before we turn our phones on. We're like doing the math, and we're like, look, I'm about 200 feet about right now of elevation. Let me fire this guy up so I get to jump on the bandwidth before this plane starts taking it over.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm with Neal. I think every memory I have of that, none of them have ever been good. Like every one of them is. The worst ones are when your phone's going crazy with the downloaded messages, and then your phone immediately starts ringing. And then the first words out of the person's mouth are, "Have you heard?" And you're just like, "Oh my God, this is going to be."
Yeah, nobody ever spends the time to say, "Hey, I just want to let you know I love you," or "I just want you to have a good day." Nobody wastes that kind of text message.
Yeah, I would say the most recent one where I had an inordinate explosion was when Kobe passed. I was flying down to Peru, and when I landed, you would have thought like an actual family member had passed.
Right.
I mean, it was just a flood of messages. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And I really don't have a good story here. Like I can think, like most of mine's just, it feels very trivial, but it's just all random stuff. But anyways, that was the first thing that came to mind reading that. And he goes to Middletown, which is actually a real town in Ohio, Middletown itself. And I've got a story about that a little bit later that is relevant to Ready Player One. Obviously, we'll talk about that here. But he mentions that there's actually 256 copies of Middletown in the Oasis. And in the book, he makes a comment about why there's so many. And in the comment, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but he basically says that there's that many because, in the event that somebody wanted to come visit that town, there was enough room to accommodate all the gunters that were looking for clues and all that sort of thing. The more times I've read this book, the more I've started to realize that really the reason why there's that many copies, and this is, again, pure conjecture on my part. I've never validated this with anybody. I've never looked it up. But the way I read this now is that he did that because that place is so pristine in such a time slice of life, and people are constantly in the Oasis that they get lost in the Oasis. So this happens to Wade a little bit later on in the novel, where he completely loses himself and really wants to completely disconnect from the real world, only to find out by the end of the novel that he actually misses the real world. And, Halliday tells him as Anorak, hey, this is where you need to be. That's, friendships are real. People are real. And that may not be the case. People may not have access to that in the real life, but there is a Middletown that's created, and 256 of these. Should anyone ever want to just get away from all the fancy, really cool stuff that everybody loves about the Oasis and just go back to a very, very simple time, which is how this was really portrayed in the novel, that being Middletown.
It's interesting because when I read that same section, like, pops to me, but for a completely different reason, right? The numerology part of me, when you see a 256, you just know that's he's nodding to 8-bit and he's nodding to binary because it's playing right into what we're about to go through. And I wonder how much of that really sticks around for even those people that are technical, that understand, the importance of that 256. Because in some cases today it's done as a nod. I mean, it's still there. We're still working off that factor, but it doesn't have the same meaning. I mean, there's applications that still use it, like WhatsApp. You can only have a finite number of people in the room, like in a group chat, and it's 256 because it's using binary to do identification of the people that are participating in the chat. Right. Yeah. So still a thing, but any of us old school 8-bit guys, 256.
Oh yeah. And it's the most basic unit of those early computers. Right. And we're going to talk about those in a minute for sure. But it's like those processors could only handle 2 to the 8th. Right. 0 to 255. I mean, it's literally like, it's the most basic building block that you have of those early processors.
Yeah. Yeah. And the numbers 64, 256, 512, they're all throughout the novel. And to your point, Will, that's all done intentionally. He absolutely did that with a number of other things as well. So let's talk about Middletown just quickly. There's a lot of great description in here. He talks about how there's cars on cinder blocks, that, there's homes that have been leveled for strip malls, which is a real thing and was a real thing, especially during the 80s when malls were booming and they had to make room for these things as they came in. He mentions gas was 93 cents a gallon. It wasn't that long ago that it almost got to that point. I don't remember what it got down to, but it was really close if I remember. But and then he talked about like the wood grain paneling and the burnt orange carpet. Neal, is this all like resonating with you? Did you grow up in a house that looked similar to this or had other, I guess, similar items that he describes here?
Yeah, not exactly the cars up on blocks, but but the color of the carpet for sure, and the wood paneling. Oh my gosh. I remember my dad's office had that all the way around, and it wasn't real wood either. It was super cheap stuff. But man, I can almost smell it now that we're talking about it, which is a scary thing.
That's exactly right. So that's what our living room looked like at the time. We had the fake wood paneling, and then we had the popcorn ceiling with the glitter in it for some reason. I have no idea why that was a thing.
It allowed more like luminous rooms, right? Or light reflection off the. No, I have no idea.
Nice.
All about style.
Maybe. Yeah.
There's
And so then I guess the last thing I want to talk about is, as I was reading this, and this is kind of some of the discourse we were having before we came on to the show here, but as I was reading this novel, the other thing that really particularly stuck out for me was him walking up to the TRS-80 and seeing that screen and then the label on there. And I just have these like memories, these very fond, like emotional, visceral memories of a computer turning on for the first time. It's the sound, it's the hum, the heat, seeing that come up there and then just not knowing what to expect, or, being, anxious about what to expect or optimistic about what to expect, because we had all these different games. And this is for me later on in life. But, Will, I know you said that, you guys had a home computer growing up. What kind of computer did you have, and how far did you guys go down the trail of like peripherals and games and all that stuff?
So we had an Atari 800 XL. So that was our go-to computer, and I think we had it all the way until I was in high school. We never upgraded our computer, and I used to hate that because we didn't have tons of money to upgrade computers. But I think what it did later in life, and we kind of talked about that Karate Kid moment, is that if you grow up in that environment, and I think why people who grow up without going to school for computers are so effective at it, is we don't really learn the box. Right? You're just figuring it out for yourself. So when you get a new piece of software put in front of you, you're not constrained by the rule sets that most people assume based on what they learned in school. So school says do this and then do this and do this and do this. And if it doesn't work at the end of that, you're out of luck. Yeah. But, for most of us guys that played on really old school computers where didn't have really an operating system, like it's not going to have the cleanest GUI. You were going to be doing a lot of scouting through menus and commands that you didn't know were going to even work to do anything, because these programmers were nerds just like you, and they were building backdoors. No War Games reference.
I mean, it's problem solving, right? At its most basic. And boy, did that lead into some of these text adventure games, the real early ones, where it was just about exploring and trying everything that you could think of, because it wasn't that you could watch a Twitch video and know the straight path to get through to the next objective, right? It was all about exploration. So I totally agree with you, Will.
Yeah.
I think Neal's preaching the gospel right now. That's what I'm talking about.
Can I get an amen?
I'm getting excited. Hey, the other thing is, I think what I remember most is really clip art. There's games I'm sure we're going to talk about later, but clip art for me was big, and so was just printing on a dot matrix printer. There was something just satisfying about being able to make a 40-foot banner that told somebody Happy Valentine's Day with 2 pieces of clip art, and you felt like you had accomplished something.
Oh my goodness, yeah, and this the sound of that, right, and the smell of it too. I don't know why smell is a big thing for me. I guess I keep
but for me, you said turning on a computer is like that. Oh, it's so, and the anticipating moment for me, and maybe I'm just crazy, it was turning off a monitor, right, and seeing the light just turn into this big, bright, solid dot as it was turning off that took like 30 seconds to fade away. I don't know why it was. I always stayed and watched that thing the entire time till it was to nothing.
Maybe you just had like electricity or like, financially conscious parents that wanted to make sure that everything was off. And so that was subconsciously you're waiting to make sure that, I don't know. All right.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to get into the pop culture now. So this is, we're going to start with something. This is a very light reference. I don't want to make a big deal about this, but we're going to talk about Greyhound buses.
Okay.
So the first reference is a millisecond later, I was standing inside a vintage 1980s phone booth located inside an old Greyhound bus station. I opened the door and stepped out. And so I thought, Greyhound is still around. I mean, this is these guys started in 1914 by a man by the name of Carl Wickman in the small town of Hibbing, Minnesota. And this guy was born in Sweden. He moved over here, and he started this whole bus line thing by charging, I think it was miners, like a nickel or something to jump in this kind of van looking thing and drive them back and forth. And eventually it obviously
grew. That's a crime today. It's a crime.
Well, yeah, probably
and just
would
have
be.
Children give you a nickel and get in the back of your van. It's gonna. That's not a good business strategy. I'm just saying.
It wouldn't, and it wasn't until like 1920s that one of the bus operators had started. The buses were like these slim-looking gray buses, and I guess one of the bus operators coined the phrase "Greyhound buses," and so he ended up adopting that a little bit later. And he ended up pairing up with like the general manager of General Motors, and so that's it. Kind of just blew up from there, and that's kind of how it all panned out. I mean, I'm really skipping over almost over 100 years of history here, but I guess the real quick question, and I want to make this very fast, but Will, have you ever rode on? When was the last time you? I know you've ridden on one, but when was the last time you rode on one? And what was the experience like? Was it like a public bus experience, or is it a little bit higher class than that?
Those listening, Albert's got a picture of the nicest Greyhound bus I've ever seen. I don't know when that thing was made.
Yeah,
it looks like
I don't know where that's located because
that's not the Greyhound I've been on. All those people look properly clothed. Look, so I don't think I've been on a Greyhound bus since I took one to Corpus Christi, probably when I was in the 5th grade. It's an uncomfortable experience. I was more of a trailways man myself, so I don't support these monopolies like Greyhound. but
Neal, what about you?
Yeah, for me, it was, a Greyhound specifically would have been about 13. I was a Boy Scout, no surprise there. And we were headed up to Canada for a jamboree. It was like the biggest, most exciting thing. And none of us had enough money to fly up there. So, Greyhound, because it's known to be a reasonably priced mode of travel. We piled all these kids in there and a couple of adults and headed all the way up across the border. But it was, for me, riding in Greyhound over the years has always been the fun smells inside the coach. And thank goodness they finally put in a bathroom. Probably wasn't even until like the 60s, the 50s or the 60s before that became a feature of the bus. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because back east, Greyhound actually started jumping on the bandwagon because there was a really thriving service that was like kind of like curbside to curbside. You could go from Boston to New York or New York down to Washington or all the way through. And this was just a thriving $15. you'd get on and you'd go. And Greyhound finally was tired of seeing that, getting money taken away from them. So they started up a couple of these really short services. One was called Yo Bus. I kid you not.
Yo Bus?
Another one. Yeah.
Like Yo MTV Raps, but just
like
Yo Bus?
Exactly. Yo, exclamation point. And you can probably understand the target market for that particular service. But there was also like Bolt Bus was another one, but they had Wi-Fi and, power outlets. So it kind of elevated the experience, at least for a 4-hour period.
Wow. Yeah. I think I rode this like maybe twice in my lifetime. My grandparents lived down in the Corpus Christi area, and that's actually where, and we're going to talk about Corpus Christi a little bit later, but I don't want to spoil that. But we drove down and I was 2 summers, I think I went on the bus by myself, and it was a really cool experience. Like, I was 13, I think the first time I ever did it. And the only time I'd ever been I'd never flown before then. So I'd only been in a car. So being in a Greyhound bus, I thought, it's pretty cool gig here. If I could get away with it more, I would have done it. So,
well, I know what you're getting for Christmas.
A Greyhound bus or a ticket?
A ticket to anywhere you want to go. Are you interested in going to El Paso in under 76 hours?
Nope, not at all. No, not my thing. All right, let's move on from Greyhound buses. And so let's talk about these guys. So this is the Walkman.
Yes.
And it says, this is a reference here. It was like stepping out of a time machine. And there's actually a couple of references here. So I'm going to lump them all together and we'll break each one of these down. It was like stepping out of a time machine. Several NPCs milled around, all dressed in mid-1980s attire. A woman with a giant ozone-depleting hairdo bobbed her head to an oversized Walkman. A kid in a gray members-only jacket leaned against the wall, working on a Rubik's Cube. A mohawked punk rocker sat in a plastic chair watching a Riptide rerun on a coin-operated television. So, Walkmans. Let's see. Walkman started in 1970, and we're going to focus on. So, Walkman was used by Sony for a lot of devices, MP3 players, CD players, that kind of thing. But we're only going to focus for the purposes of this episode. We're going to focus on the tape players. So, the tape players started in 1979. They were manufactured all the way up into 2010, which was surprising. I didn't realize it went that far. I would have thought by the 90s this thing would have died out, right? But it kept going. And then some other quick stats here. So it's estimated.
So what you're telling me is the Walkman lasted longer than the Microsoft Zoom did?
Yes, they're very true. Just by a little bit.
Just by that much.
Yep. It's estimated that Sony sold a total of 186 million cassette Walkmans over the course of its lifespan, and was so popular that the term Walkman became genericized. Right? Everybody that had a portable cassette player like this, it was just called a Walkman, much like Kleenex or, I think we covered Xerox. Yeah, we covered some of these in a previous episode of The Basement, but here's another example where this thing got generalized or genericized is the term. And then lastly, the last thing I want to say is a question for you guys, and Neal, I'll kick it off to you first. Did you ever own one? And more importantly, did yours say it's a Sony on it? Because that was their tagline, if you remember, for them, and that was a big deal. Like to have a Sony, that meant something for me, at least the way I understood in the 80s. That was kind of an icon or an idol of some sort.
Yeah, my first one was not. It was probably either a Toshiba or a Panasonic. But then when I graduated, I got the Sports, which you're showing an image of right now.
Yeah,
it's that yellow. More importantly, it was waterproof because clearly I was listening to a lot of music underwater and it was really helping me out there.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was the coolest thing that, now I could really work out and apparently sweat profusely and it wouldn't ruin the listening experience. But for me, unfortunately, I stuck with the Walkman brand for a long, long time. I had a Discman and then I also had the mini disc version of the Walkman. So I just kept walking down there until finally the iPod came around.
Oh, so you jumped right before the MP3 players came out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's funny because they would tag all of these as like the Discman, and then eventually they would just rebrand it as the Walkman, but Walkman Disc or Walkman, I don't know what they were calling them at the time, but they kept coming back to it and coming back to the original name of it.
Yeah,
and,
still have them. Yeah.
What about you, Will? Did you have one of these and was it legit, or did you pick this up at the flea market over there off of South San Antonio?
Yeah, no, for sure. I did not have the money for a functioning Sony Walkman, or I'm not sure I owned a piece of technology that had a proper label until I was 20 something.
Yeah, right.
I think, but at that point I did, and I used it quite a bit throughout the 90s because I was deployed a lot. So it wasn't like today where you could Skype somebody or anything. So I had an Iowa because it had the best on recorder mic and a Walkman function. So I'd make tapes and then send them back to my fiance, now wife, while I was deployed all over the world.
Yeah. So and I just quickly, I had a couple of these. I never had. I think I had a Sony. No, I never had a Sony Walkman. I had a Sony tape player. I've got two of them now, exact same models. But the big thing that was always interesting to me is that if you can see it there on the, I'm showing this like Walkman here in the middle, this gray one, this mega bass.
Yeah.
Like I actually, for the first time, it was, again, I never owned one, but when I listened to that, I got what they were doing. And I don't know if this is just pure marketing. I don't remember what the technology was here. But there was something about that big bass sound that was coming out of these things. And this is right around really the birth of rap music. And being able to listen to rap music with a Sony Walkman with the mega bass marketing stuff all over it was kind of an experience of in itself. So I really wanted one of these and never got a chance to own one. So, okay.
I think you mean gangster rap. That's yeah, not just rap. Like this Sony Walkman you're showing with the LCD monitor, I'm thinking that's 88.
Oh, that's probably 90s. Late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, I think it's 88 because I think that's about probably the time we were there. So probably not the birth of, but maybe that Black Sheep DOS Effects era.
Right. That's the original one there, and it's kind of iconic now because it's got the orange, pads there on the ear headphones there. So, okay, let's talk about punk rock hairstyles. This is going to be a really quick one, but I've got some pictures that I'm showing here of just some traditional like 80s punk rock. This is what I would think when I saw punk rock. And don't get me wrong, there's like the high mohawks and then there's like the low mohawks or like the ones that Mr. T would wear, right? He was notorious for wearing a mohawk of some sort. And there was a number of these, but I got a question for you. And I think I'm going to pick on Neal. You're our guest. I'm going to pick on you. I got a question for you. How long ago do you think how long do you think the mohawk hairstyle has been around? Do you think it's A, 60 years, B, 120 years, C, 600 years, or D, 1,000 years or more?
I'm going to go 600.
600, final answer, or phone a friend?
Oh, I'm going to phone a friend, and it's going to be Will.
Yeah, I'm going to go 1,000 or more.
1,000 or more.
1,000 or more, easy. It's easy. That's easy.
So the answer is it's the so there's a man called and I'm going to screw this up, the Cloney Caven Man. I don't know if I've said that right, but the Cloney Caven Man, 2,000 years old, was there was a character, I guess a person named Boyd, who was found in 2003, was found wearing a mohawk, and the mohawk stuff that was made and put in his hair was made out of plant oil and pine resin. So the mohawk's been around.
Use today. I use that today.
No, you use Tres Flores.
That guy was way ahead of his time.
Tres Flores.
Yep. So yeah, it's been around for 2,000 years. So the correct answer was D. So congratulations, good job on leading on Will there.
What do we get there?
Oh, you'll find out. A little bit later.
I'm he's all about crafting prizes. Oh, yeah.
I thought you were going to go with the ozone depleting hairstyles because I mean they're especially here in Texas, all the Aquanet. We had to have a hole in the ozone layer directly above our high school because these chicks were bringing in like the largest cans of Aquanet possible so that they could tease that bun in front of their hair to see how high it could go. I'm shocked that you went mohawk instead of that direction because I'm sure you dated at least 4 women that were rocking that.
Yeah, I probably did. It was kind of the thing though. And maybe now that you've said that, I'll bring that into an episode somewhere. We'll have to bring in like that hairstyle and kind of display it up here for everybody to see. So yeah, mohawks are really popular. They were actually popular in the 70s, and they really kind of blossomed in the 80s with the punk rock really taking off and that kind of hard rock metal and all that stuff. So
and really the Final Fight series, they seem to always carry villains with.
Yeah, there was always
every iteration of that game had at least one group of mohawk bad guys,
requisite guys. Yeah.
Yep, and they were all.
That's
American.
how you knew they were bad guys. They got mohawks.
Did any of you have? Did you guys either one of you have a mohawk?
I wish I had enough hair to do a mohawk. I would do it right now.
No. Okay.
No, I rocked a wedge for a while. That's probably it. And then I dyed my hair red that one year. Yeah. That's probably the craziest I had my hair.
Oh,
Like
that was a great
not
summer.
regular red, like the Little Mermaid red.
It's like,
And then somebody didn't tell us that you couldn't get in a pool if you had dyed your hair. So then it turned this
weird color.
battery acid orange color,
Yeah.
like much like the Mohawk guy you're showing on the far right. I think he did the same thing.
Yeah, he probably jumped into the pool. All right. Before you start divulging even more stories of our youth, I'm going to move on to Riptide. So, Riptide was this ran from 1984 to 1986. It was a TV show, 3 seasons, 56 episodes. This is another Stephen Cannell and Frank Lupo production. So we spoke about these two people back in one of the episodes for Chapter 6, but they're known for like the A-Team and Greatest American Hero, Hard Counsel McCormick, 21 Jump Street, BJ and the Bear, Magnum PI, Walker, Texas Ranger. I mean, you think about all like the cheese, and I hate to say this because I really enjoyed most of those shows. But when you think about really cheesy 80s programming, these guys were probably behind it in some way. So it was created by those two guys. It was starring Perry King as Cody Allen, Joe Penny as Nick Ryder, and Tom Bra as Murray Boz Bozinski. There was a fourth member, but we'll talk about him in just a second. The show, you guys probably know what I'm talking about. So the show was about a pair of former Army buddies, Cody Allen and Nick Ryder, which they sound like video game, like they sound like the substitutes or stunt doubles. For
every 80s
Contra.
character had to sound like a video game character.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. So you got Cody Allen and Nick. Yep. They're former Army buddies. They've turned detectives, and they run Pier 56 Detective Agency, a high-tech and computer-friendly agency who go around solving cases with the help of a super nerdy hacker by the name of Boz. The agency operates out of a boat called the Riptide, which is where we get our title. And the show was known for its early use, early use and adoption of computers and technology, as well as some of the vehicles that they used to show, which we're going to talk about too in a minute. They had a helicopter. That's the helicopter that you see right there behind Mr. Will if you're watching live. They have a Chevy Corvette. They had a station wagon at one point. They had a GMC Jimmy. And so the vehicles were almost showcased and almost characters themselves as well. So without further ado, let me click this over here because we can land on this and we'll talk about some stuff here. So there you were showing the three main characters. There's the helicopter, the Jimmy. Okay, so first off, Neal, did you watch this show growing up at all?
Oh, absolutely. The interesting thing was this was on at the same time as Moonlighting. Yeah. And so I had to use a VCR to record one or the other while I watched the other.
Yeah. And that, we won't get into this, but I think they ended up writing in Moonlighting in some way. There was a nod to them at some point in the series. Right,
yeah. I mean, it was just a great formulaic show. I mean, a la, A-Team and the rest of them, that it was just like, it was great stuff. They had incredible eye candy. I mean, first of all, there was, Mama Joe and the boat right next to him, right, with all the girls as a crew. That wasn't too bad to look at, for sure.
Right, yeah. Oh, I thought you were talking about these three guys.
But yeah,
handsome fellows.
Hey, Cody and Nick had their shirts off like the majority of the time.
Oh, it was
for sure to appeal to the female audience, for sure.
Yeah, he looks like a poor man's like Magnum PI, like a. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I'm sure that's what they were going for.
Here's a piece of trivia for you. Perry King, who played Cody, actually did the voice of Han Solo in the radio drama version of Star Wars. So there's your fact of the evening.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I didn't realize he actually did that. So that's awesome. Will, what about you? Did you watch this thing? And what do you think about the robot? Because that's the fourth cast member here that we're talking about.
That is fantastic. Unlike other robots that were, because robots were everywhere about this time on TV. This one didn't talk, so she's a shy chick. She doesn't say a lot.
It wasn't like Twinkie. We didn't have like bitty 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 or anything.
No catchphrase, no nothing.
Yeah,
but I did know ended up in the water a lot though.
Well, I think her head was a football. I'm not sure.
I don't know what's going on there. Yeah.
So if you read the book,
there's a book.
No, no. I'm talking about Ready Player One.
I think there's a book. That book.
Have you heard of this book, Ready Player One?
Yeah.
Anyway, so in the book, it's 1986, and he says it's the perfect autumn day, right? So my crazy brain had to go back and say, when was autumn? Because autumn actually changes every year. So it's either going to be in the August time frame of 21st, 22nd, or 23rd, depending on when the year is. So He says it's 86 autumn, right? So this show went off the air in 86. In fact, it went off the air, I think, on August 22nd, 1986. So the only thing that dude could have been watching was the finale because it didn't go into syndication afterwards.
Yeah.
So that's, you can kind of get down to the weeds to say, even though Ernie didn't say it, this is the only episode they could have been watching on the TV. Right. Because, you know, you remember those TVs from back in the day at Greyhound stations and the like, right? You threw a quarter in. It's not like it was going to pull up a playlist and you hit a button and watch what you wanted. You just got whatever was on.
You know, and we didn't mention this, but in the last show we did, when we talked about Rain Man, there's a scene in Rain Man where he's watching television. Rain Man's watching, and I think they're I think they were at a casino, or maybe it was a bus station or something. I forget. No, it was a bus station right before he leaves at the very end of the movie. And he's in one of those coin-operated televisions. He's sitting there in one of those booths and feeding coins into it. So just quick tie back to the last episode. So the other, I mentioned that there's another, I guess the vehicles were kind of cast members. And I found this, so I didn't realize they actually did toy lines. Like up there on the top left, you can see there's the Chevy, Corvette or Camaro, whatever that. I think, what is it?
No, it's a Corvette. It's a 1960 Corvette.
Yeah, 1960 Corvette. And here's the model kit here. So they actually made a model kit, and then they've got, this is the back of the box here. But so here's my thing on this. I don't remember the show. First off, number one, in all candidness, but I didn't realize it's very astounding to me that they actually went out and made replica toys. Was it that popular of a show that they did this? Or was this just somebody taking advantage of, look, we've got to get product out. Hey, there's a show called Riptide. There's stuff there that we can just leverage. Let's ask the company. Sure, deal sign, pump it out. But it almost feels like this was a bigger show than what it was. And I may be wrong there.
They just had a really good licensing person on staff. I mean, that's really, it wasn't, I mean, it didn't really shoot up into the big pop culture landscape, but it was still really, really liked, at least for a couple of years. And the fact that they would showcase, this Corvette, the Riptide speedboat, which was also really slick, had all these vehicles that were really interesting and part of the show, meant that if you really liked it, man, you were going to go build that model, or you were going to buy that for sure.
Yeah.
Right. And model sets back then, those models were already being made. So if you could relicense a model that already existed, like a 1960 Corvette was already in the AMT wheelhouse, they just slapped the new cover on it, added a new paint scheme, and said, bam, let's see if this guy sells. In fact, the picture behind me is actually just one of the models. Just somebody who customized this to make it look like the Screaming Mimi.
Oh, nice.
That's not a real helicopter behind me.
Right. Well, it's I enjoyed this. So I ended up watching a couple of these shows, and it was, like you said, very formulaic, whatever that word was.
Do it again. Do it again.
I'm not going to do it again.
Formulaic.
Thank you. But it was very reminiscent of all those shows. It was just another cookie cutter show, but it was actually pretty good. I enjoyed it. And the fact that they were trying to use, and I guess this is where either Ernie Klein or maybe Halliday, they're kind of one and the same, but this is where the mass appeal of the show was really the fact that they were constantly using computers and leveraging early computers and technology and maybe robots. I don't know if that's a robot, but they were leveraging that in the show.
I think it might be one of the earliest to start the trend of how computers work, like the misinformation campaign of what the average American thought a computer could do or couldn't do, started getting skewed by the media way back then, right? And carried through until
last
today.
Week. Yes.
Today. Earlier this morning.
Yeah, the last CSI episode came out. Yeah.
Yeah, Boz was hacking into IRS computers from the boat, where it was maybe there was some satellite communication, maybe, but yeah, it's this is a little early to be able to hack that well on a boat.
Yeah. So at some point, unlike the reality of weird science, because all of that,
that's legit. That's
it's why I'm married.
There's another show that comes to mind, and it is mentioned in the Ready Player One novel, although we have not broken it down, and I'm looking forward to it because it is the one show that it's one of those geek out moments as I was reading the novel, but it's the Whiz Kids, and I watched that show a lot, and because they were really into computers and I was into computers, so that's why it's very shocking for me that one, I never picked this up or never really picked up the fact that they were using computers or at all. But the Whiz Kids certainly resonated with, but that's not what we're here to talk about. All right, we're going to move on. So we're going to talk about the next topic here. And this is the John Cougar Mellencamp reference. And this says, the NPC citizens all look like extras from a John Cougar Mellencamp video. I saw people out raking leaves, walking dogs, and sitting on porches. So John Cougar Mellencamp was born in 1951 in Seymour, Indiana. He was one of the pioneers of a music genre called Heartland rock. He has a total of 22 top 40 hits in the U.S. He's been nominated for 13 Grammys. He's won one of those nominations for a Grammy for Best Male Rock Performer for Hurts So Good. And so let's start with this. So, I mean, Cougar Mellencamp, and we're going to talk about his name here in a little bit too, because that was a fiasco that I remember growing up and constantly hearing about for whatever reason. But he had a lot of great hits. There was I Need a Lover from 1979, Jack and Diane. I think we all know that one. Hurts So Good, Small Town, the Authority song, and then Rockin' in the USA, which seems to get played at bar mitzvahs and celebrations all across
wedding receptions.
Yeah, exactly.
Republican conferences.
That's true. But yeah, so he had all those great ones, a lot of great songs. And we'll talk about the videos here, but Will, were you a big fan of him growing up, or was he just, and I don't mean this in any disrespect, because I've come to appreciate him over the years, but even when he came out, he was kind of labeled as a light, Bruce Springsteen, right? And there was a lot of parallels being drawn between him and Bruce and what they were doing. And Bruce was already well established by the time Mellencamp had come out, but he eventually got up there. I mean, he got to that. I would say he got to that level. Maybe not. But did you want or listen to him at all?
Yeah, I think long before the issues with Pac and Biggie and Bad Boy Records, the East Coast West Coast rap battle takes back seat to the far East Coast Bruce Springsteen and the Middle America John Cougar Mellencamp, whatever he's calling himself. I don't even know what he is today, but I know he's still rocking the haircut. So
he is.
Yeah, I was a fan. So I love that music because I thought the sound was very Middle America for me. I mean, just about everything that you have mentioned as a song has been sung by me at some level of inebriation in the past.
So Neal, like thinking about the music videos, are there any that come to mind? Well, first off, I guess, are you a fan of Mellencamp, and can you recall any music videos from those songs or songs that maybe I didn't mention?
Yeah, it's actually interesting that you bring this up. Yes, fan, not at first, certainly not after American Fool. It took till maybe Scarecrow before I actually was like, okay, there's something here. It's not just a flash in the pan. Yep. But actually, the interesting thing is that he got popular. It wasn't because of videos, especially during this time where that was all that there was. That was the only way that you experienced new music. Very rarely were you actually, listening to radio. Is more, what did you catch on MTV, things like that.
Yep.
And his videos weren't, they were really almost a reflection of his beliefs in small town, middle of Indiana. And certainly the instrumentation didn't lend itself to the sexiest things either. An accordion, a bow fiddle, an auto harp, whatever, it was really interesting because he was so different from the rest of pop music. And I think that's what made him successful, because he offered something really, really different.
Yeah. And eventually this genre of music would spin off into like Americana.
Huge.
There's a great radio station out in New Braunfels that does a lot of Americana, and I listen to it quite frequently. And you can hear the roots. I mean, you can hear where a lot of his music started. You can hear the music today, and it has its origins. It has its roots in the stuff that he was putting out, or like Melissa Etheridge was putting out. I'm trying to think of other like Cheryl.
Well, and he'll
now.
make sure that that he doesn't get the credit for that.
Yeah,
he says that in tons of interviews.
Right.
Basically, I'm the one that started this roots rocker thing. Whether he gets credit or not, right?
Yeah, and I'm a bigger Bruce Springsteen fan, like huge Springsteen fan. So it's hard.
Really, I think I would go John Cougar over Bruce.
Oh,
overexposed.
How do I drop?
Wow.
You know how to drop me. You know how to do it.
Just do it.
Pull
the trigger. You don't have the guts. All right.
Do it.
Let's talk about his identity crisis. So so when he first came out, okay. All through the 80s, it seemed like this was all over MTV. He was constantly John Mellencamp, John Cougar Mellencamp. At one point, he was Johnny Cougar. The deal is, when he was originally going to release his very first album. He was trying to find somebody that would actually sign it, right? And there was a guy named Tony DeFries, and he was running a business called Main Man Entertainment. And so he had like David Bowie, Lou Reed, Iggy Pop. He had some pretty big names under his belt. And when he heard the demo tape, he felt like there was something there, but he didn't like this name of John Mellencamp because it was German, didn't sound sexy enough. And so
nobody's going to know how to pronounce it.
No one's going to do it. No one's going to want to sign up for this. No one's going to buy records. So he was like, okay, we need to put something. First off, it's not John, it's now Johnny. And there were a couple of names that were thrown out there. There was Johnny Mustang, Johnny Indiana. There was Johnny Puma that they were at one point, they were tossing around. They ultimately land on Johnny Cougar. And so when he released his first LP, he was like, fine, I'll do whatever you need me to do. I just want to get this album out. So he signed out. His first album came out as Johnny Cougar. The first two albums didn't really do that well. Like he had a hit like in 79, but it didn't do very well. And so the record label ended up dropping him. So it was kind of an opportunity for him to kind of rebrand himself now. And for whatever reason, he kept the Cougar, but he just went to John Cougar. And that name stuck around for quite a while. It wasn't until like the mid 80s that he finally shed himself free of the Cougar name and just went to John Mellencamp. But I remember when and I may be completely making this up. This may be just a dream that I had, but I could have sworn there was MTV news, like MTV breaking news, that his name was now John Mellencamp. That's how much of a big deal this thing was. Am I wrong, or do anybody else remember?
No, I think that's right. In fact, so the whole Mellencamp part, right? The German.
Oh, look at you, Mellencamp. My bad. Sorry.
Mellencamp. So when he came in with his name, they said, look, people aren't going to buy these records. A dude named DeFries said that Mellencamp would turn off potential people who were interested in his music. So that's why he went on this roller coaster of name changes, was because they said his last name just wasn't markable. And of course, that's a story that's been told 100 times in Hollywood.
Yep.
Well, I mean, as he got better or more popular, and he suddenly had some credibility, mostly financial credibility, right, with the studios, that's when he was able to sort of make these changes a little bit at a time. He didn't feel like he had enough power until it was probably not even until the 90s before he was able to drop the Cougar name completely.
Right.
I think
it was. People were still calling him that, and I don't know how he identifies these days, but I think he just sticks to John Mellencamp. I don't think he minds the Cougar so much, but I know it was for a while there he really wanted to shed that. All right, the I don't know where I went down this rabbit hole when I was looking this stuff up, but at one point he was offered the role that Brad Pitt had in Thelma and Louise, and he turned that role down because he didn't feel like that was really him, and so he makes this joke now when he does interviews that, Brad Pitt successful because of him. So, right. Yeah. All right.
That makes sense.
It does.
And he married a model. Let's not forget that, shall we?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's also that. So Mellencamp, let's move to some vehicles. So the reference here is an NPC piloted cars and trucks cruise slowly up and down the shady streets, all of them gas-guzzling antiques like Trans Ams, Dodge Omnis, IROC Z28s, and K cars. I've only got one question for here. We're not going to. I've got all of these vehicles up here. You can see the Trans Ams over here in the top left. I've got the IROC, which I love that color scheme. There's the Omni, the Dodge Omni's kind of right here in black. This is one of the Ford. This is the K car down here in the bottom left-hand corner.
The Chrysler. Yep.
Chrysler, yep. And then the bottom right-hand corner is Ford sedans, which is also mentioned in this chapter a little bit later. But if you had to pick one, of these cars, Neal, which one are you going to pick?
It's going to be the Trans Am, please.
Okay. What about you?
Smoking the Bandit.
I know,
Come on.
it's
Come
hard.
On.
It really is.
Come on.
Well,
look, I know who I am. I'm driving the K car. I know who I am. Besides, it gives me the most flexibility.
Oh, listen, spoken like a father of three.
Thanks, Dad.
No, look, there is not an FBI agent in an 80s film that's not driving a K car. There's not one. There's not one government undercover guy. I don't care if we're watching Cloak and Dagger, whatever movie. There's going to be K cars in it. See, you and your Trans Am, you're limited to one film. I'm in all of them.
Well, there was at least 3 Smoking the Bandits, so
that's true.
But if you have a K car, you're basically, those are cars that were made by Chrysler, Dodge, Plymouth, Volair even made a K car. So there's at least 20 cars in my garage.
Plenty of mediocrity to go around.
Yeah.
That's right. Hey, I own my average.
I just noticed your background. Sorry, I don't mean to disrupt the channel here, but you changed it to Kmart. I didn't realize that. Or is that what you came in with?
No.
No.
Remember we had the helicopter.
Screaming Mimi.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Screaming Mimi.
We're about to go to Kmart here shortly.
Yes, we are.
I'm just preparing myself, making my way to the door.
Okay, so all right. If
Albert, how about you?
I know. Man, that smoking, that Trans Am is really slick looking. Like, I would love that. But I do like the color scheme on the IROC. But yeah, it's going to be Smoking the Bandit. Trans Am, all the way.
The crazy thing is that both the Camaro, the IROC, and the Trans Am are both built off the same body. I didn't even know that growing up. I just hated the Camaros with a passion.
Really?
But they're basically built off the same body. So silly me.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on. Let's talk about, all right, spoiler alert. We're going to talk about Kmart. So, I don't even know where to start with these guys. So the reference here is, however, I did spot a familiar family photo on the living room wall. This portrait had been taken at the local Kmart in 1984, but Mr. and Mrs. Halliday were still dressed in late 70s fashions. So for those of you who don't know what Kmart is, and it's funny because there probably are people these days that don't know, but for those of you that don't, this is basically a big box store. It started in 1899. It's still around, sort of, maybe barely hanging on by a thread.
Holding on. Word hasn't got to some states that they're bankrupt.
That's why those stores are still in operation. Yeah. Let's see the origins. So the stores first started in 1899. They were started by a man by S.S. Kriege, I think is his name. Kresge. Thank you. They were officially first opened in 1899, and his first name is Sebastian too. Sorry, I should have said that. But him and his brother-in-law, they kind of went in and bought this one store. It was a 5 and dime. They converted that store and kind of blew it up from there. It didn't actually get its name until 1962 when it was finally named Kmart. And then it just flourished. I mean, this thing blew up between the 70s and the 80s. It peaked at about 2,486 stores in 1994. In 2004, Kmart was purchased by Sears for $1 billion. I think it was the other way around. I think they bought Sears, and then they just kept the Sears brand name because it had more worth or popularity. And the stores are really kind of built on the success of just discounted merchandise, right? No big shocker there. Kind of very much like Walmart or Target. But I got a question because I said 2,486 stores back in the day, and today, at least as of this show, there are only 43 remaining stores, period. I think it may be down to 41 now. I think I just read something earlier, but it's somewhere in the low 40s in terms of how many Kmart stores are still around. So Neal, I don't know if you did the research here, and I'm not trying to be like rhetorical, but what happened to Kmart? Like, what exactly happened? Because the decline is super rapid in terms of how much they went from, basically ruling for a number of years to nothing today.
Basically, what happened to them is Walmart. I mean, just plain and simple. So what they did is their big thing was discounted prices with national brands. And what ended up happening is that Walmart started to really come on strong and commanded much more of the supply chain and was able to compete on price. And so what they started to do is they started taking on Walmart in price, which is just never a good thing to do.
Right, yeah. And
so you start running negative gross margins on some of your stuff. And the other thing that they weren't doing is they weren't investing in the interior and exterior of the stores, right? There was no revitalization of the store designs like Walmart and Target both continue to do. So it felt like you were walking into a better place. Just Kmart just kept feeling more like a garbage dump over and over and over again. And the other thing that they made a huge mistake in doing is that they tried to use mergers and acquisitions to kind of buy their way out to get bigger and bigger. So they picked up Payless, they picked up Walden's Books, they picked up Borders, they picked up Sports Authority, all these things that just suddenly started dragging down their bottom line and made it even worse before they then spun that back out. So it's not too simple because they were huge. I was a customer there. My family went there for the layaway. That was the big thing there, is that you wanted a toy, but you couldn't afford it, but you could afford a little bit every month, right?
Yeah.
And so eventually 8 months later, you'd get that toy by, just simply paying away.
So, Will, we grew up not far from a Kmart. I think the closest one to us was on Military Drive, if I remember that correctly. But how often were you guys here? What do you have fond memories of Kmart? I do personally, but I want to hear about yours.
No, absolutely. It seemed like every Kmart had their toy section immediately to your left when you entered. So, loved going to Kmart. Like, it didn't matter where we were. If my mom was going to shop, they were just going to drop us off, much like JR's talking about. We either got dropped off to the food court, and then we would wander around the toy section. And that's pretty much all we were going to do. I will say that I have had the sad displeasure of going and visiting 2 Kmarts like the week they were closing, where they were already to the everything must go, including the fixtures. It is about the saddest thing you can ever do. But really, to Neal's point, if your business strategy is simply being low-cost market provider and you have no other market differentiator other than cost, when somebody bigger or someone's more effective at controlling the supply chain, you are ultimately going to be eliminated because there's nothing else to do. So Kmart's death, I don't think they realized that they died way before they started closing their doors.
Yeah. Yeah, there was, it's the one thing that I guess the kind of to summarize it, it felt like they just kind of lost touch with their customer and what they were really trying to do and what they were about and what made them successful.
Right. You can see that today, even with Target. Like, Target doesn't frame themselves as low-cost provider. It's Target. It's some of the finest products you can have. Like, you only need to go price match in the food section of a Target and a Walmart to see that they're targeting different demographics. They're looking for middle-income households. People are more comfortable going to a Target than a Walmart. There's not a People of Target page out there that you can go visit.
Yep. So my memories of Kmart were very similar. I've got 2 primary memories, and I'll make it short. One is the blue light special, because there was something magical about hearing, attention Kmart shoppers, for the next 10 minutes, if you move over to the whatever aisle or section, you can buy this something. They would just go on and on. And there would be this, I just remember like this frenzy of people that would suddenly, congregate on that area wherever that blue light was flashing because they wanted to pick up these deals. It was almost like a what do you call it? Like a flash sale that we would see today on a particular website or some sort, right? That was one. And that the blue lights, we could do a whole show on the blue light because it kept coming and going. They would bring it back and then they'd drop it, bring it back and then they would drop it. They never really stuck with it. And there's commercials out there and some really great stuff about the blue light specials. But that was one thing that stood out to me. And then I have a fond memory of when the Cabbage Patch Kids came out and that frenzy that was going on. Mom went and stood in line just to get into the Kmart. Went through we stood in line, and when they opened the doors, I mean, it was a mass rush of people. And this is the one on Military Drive in San Antonio. Mass rush of people into the back to get the Cabbage Patch Kids, and she didn't get one. And so the one thing that they were doing is like they announced, attention Kmart shoppers, if you come out here, we're doing blue light special here, and you can put a raffle ticket in for a drawing that we're going to do for a Cabbage Patch doll. And so Mom went and she went out there, filled out her little coupon. We stayed. That drawing did not happen for like 6 hours, and you had to be present to win. We were at that Kmart. I saw every single thing, not just the toys, but everything in the Kmart. And when they announced the winner, it was her.
Of course it was.
You would have thought.
Of course it was.
You know my mom.
Mom wins everything.
You would have thought she had just won the freaking lottery. She was across the store from where she had to pick this up. And when they said Genora Padilla, you could hear her screaming, running down the aisle like the Price is Right kind of thing, going to pick up the Cabbage Patch, and that's the first Cabbage Patch that my sister got. So,
for our listeners at home, Albert does know how to say his mom's name. That's just what they said in the store.
If they got that right, yeah.
You didn't even say Padilla. You gave it the Y. Nicely done. Yeah. Hey, I was hoping one of you 2 guys had looked into done the research. I was looking forward to hearing a story about why the blue light?
It actually started out as red.
Ah,
it actually initially was a red light, and then they went back and forth. But I don't know why the blue light. I have no idea.
Maybe it was just the contrast. Since the logo was red, they were going blue. I don't know.
Red light usually means an emergency or something bad is happening. Blue light is okay. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I like that.
So after watching Evil Dead and Army of Darkness, could you ever walk into a Kmart again without quoting that movie?
Nope. And it shows up like that's a great example of pop culture reference where Kmart showed up. The other one that came to mind was Beetlejuice. You remember in Beetlejuice where his head comes out of the little town and he's got the umbrella around his head and then he's got a little dangly things and he goes, attention, Kmart shoppers, whatever. He does the line in Beetlejuice for Kmart. But it is, I mean, and that's kind of a sign of the times. I mean, it was so popular, especially then, that this is where you went. This is where you went to go buy stuff. It was the Walmart or the Target or the Amazon of its time and did that for a number of years. I think Sears
I would say it was the
bigger.
Target of that era because it wasn't low cost provider then. I mean, because it was no TG and Y, sir. It was this is Kmart.
Yes, yeah, that's very true. So back to the reference though, and because the reference really is, I mean, we've dug into Kmart probably way more than we needed to, but the reference is really talking about the pictures and the pictures that were taken. The family photos were done at the Kmart. Did you guys ever go to any? We can just open this up to any of like Montgomery Ward or Target or whatever else. Did you got Olin Mills? Neal, did you guys do this every year?
Sears and JCPenney both.
Yep.
The Sears Portrait Studios, you came walking in there. Absolutely. Everybody had the cheesy smiles on and matching outfits. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, what about you? Was Glamour Shots or was that
no? No, that was your sister. So Sears for us, we somewhere out there in the ether is a picture of all of us looking slightly to the left.
Yep. And there's so many pictures of like there's so many family photos that look like the families are just miserable. And I often think like, is it because they were forced to get together and get dressed and then get down there? People were fighting, and then you had to wait in line before your name was called. And by the time it was ready, you were ready to actually take a photo. Everybody was just done, tapped out, wanted to go home. And so that's what we get.
Mom threatened our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, my first family photos, me, my wife, and Albert's goddaughter, my oldest, was at Sears. That was our first family photo. Nice. It was about 40 pounds ago, as I recall.
All right, let's put Kmart to rest, and I don't mean that.
That is the longest Kmart segment in podcasting history.
We didn't even talk about all the logos that I've got up on the screen, but we'll move on. Okay, we're going to talk about the TRS-80. There's another reference in here that I didn't put a slide for, but it was there's a mention here. It says the carpet was horrendous mustard color, so was the wallpaper, but the walls were almost entirely covered in movie and rock posters, Real Genius, War Games, Tron, Pink Floyd, Devo, and Rush. All of this is, we've probably covered all of it. Yeah, we have. We've covered every one of these except for Rush, and Rush will be its whole thing later down the road for obvious reasons. But Neal, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, you've got some kind of connection with Pink Floyd, do you not?
Not anything other than just a deep-seated love of Dark Side of the Moon, especially all the variations of it that other people have recorded.
Okay. Someone had told me once that you had done something development wise for Pink Floyd. Maybe it's
Grateful Dead.
It's Grateful Dead. Okay. All right.
Nice research, for another time. You've embarrassed us both. You embarrassed us in front of Neal.
No.
Bringing up something got nothing to do with anything.
At least he remembers.
I did. And this is like 2 years ago somebody sent it. Okay, so we'll save that for another story, another time.
Good.
Another time. All right, let's talk about the TRS-80. The TRS-80 is a reference. Like many home computers of its era, it was housed in the same case as its keyboard. The TRS-80 Color Computer 2 16K RAM was printed on a label above the keys. Cables snaked out of the back of the machine, leading to an audio cassette recorder, a small color television, a dot matrix printer, and a 300 baud modem. So quickly on the origins, the TRS-80 or the Tandy Radio Shack, the Tandy Radio Shack Z80 processor computer, was a microcomputer built by Tandy and sold through all of its stores, which were Radio Shack at the time. Its selling points were it had a full-size keyboard, faster CPU, it had 4K of RAM, which I laugh at when I think 4K, my goodness. 4K of RAM, and then normally a lot of the computers at the time were only coming with 1K, so it was kind of a pretty big step up here. It was expandable to like 16K. You could get your basic built into it. It had a cassette drive. There was a high resolution 128 by 48 screen that came with it, or that's the resolution that it would pump out. And if you bought the expansion interface, you got 32K more memory. You could get a floppy disk drive that was only single density. It had a parallel port, and it came with a like a massive, not a massive, but a really cool RS-232 port, which I don't even remember the last time I even used that. I mean, that was so long ago. And it wasn't the first computer that was out by any means, but it was probably, I mean, it outsold all the computers at the time until Apple eventually caught them. And there was a reason why, because it was just massively available. If you think about it, they were making these computers and pumping them into the Tandy stores or the Radio Shack stores. And I remember growing up and going into Radio Shack, and I was seeing computers for the first time. But more importantly, they had the wall of all the software. And, you know, you seeing all of these games and products and applications out there and wondering, like, flipping around, looking at the box art and thinking, my gosh, looks so much better than, you know, the 2600 that I've been playing games on, and the resolution's better and all that. So Neal, I brought you onto the show just to talk about the TRS-80. No,
good, because I love it. Thank you.
Now you had one of these, right? And I've got the price up here. It was $600. Did you buy it when it first came out, or was it something that you picked up a little bit later down the road?
So no, I actually, the only one that I could afford at the time was the color computer, right? So it was the Trash 80 Color. It had only 4K of RAM as well. But for those of your listeners and viewers that can remember newspapers, I had a paper route as a kid growing up. That's how I made my money. It was well before I was old enough to be able to get an actual job. And I would go down to that Radio Shack down on Redwood Road like every few nights and walk into the store and start learning BASIC on the computer, because that was basically in the ROM, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so I would just start trying stuff out, and every time I would leave, I'd leave it in a repeat loop, you know, saying something I'm sure very, very positive. But it absolutely fell in love with it because it only had 4K of RAM. It meant that your code, literally, you couldn't put spaces in between some of the words on the line. And so you were squeezing every little bit out there. So being able to get a game that resembled like Missile Command, because the color computer had a little joystick on it. Yeah. Man, I can't tell you how long I spent writing that code, then loading it into a cassette tape, because it was all done through sound, loading it on there as the storage device, and then trying to find it on the cassette to reload it back into RAM and still continue to work on the code. But like Will talked about earlier, that was just this sense of problem solving and exploration that I think really, really helped me to this day, right? Because we had to struggle so hard just to get some stupid graphics up on the screen. But yeah, this version, both the Trash 1 and the Trash 82, I was able to access those at school, but at home it was the color computer.
So did you ever dive into either one of these books here? Starting with extended color base.
It was the only thing where I lived that you had access to. You know, I wasn't in a big town like San Antonio, you know, where you had access to that kind of stuff. And there wasn't, I mean, even mail order, there wasn't anywhere to know where to write or where to get this until you bought a magazine, right? Whether it's Byte or, you know, one of the others. That was the only way. So usually it was the crap lying around the Radio Shack that we figured out how things worked. And anytime that they had a new game in, it was like Christmas all over again, right?
Yep. I didn't own a TRS-80, but I had a second cousin who did, and we would visit over there every 3-4 months. My mom would want to go see her cousin, so I'd show up, and this kid was a lot older than me, and I could never get him to turn this thing on. Like, he was almost using it as like leverage to kind of throw it in my face that he had a computer and I didn't. And eventually, I finally got him to give in. He was going to turn it on. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to just kind of see what this thing would do. And come to find out, didn't have a single game, didn't have anything on cassette, didn't have a cartridge, no floppy drive, nothing to save anything. And so all he had were like these magazines that had code in them, and I don't know if it was Byte or whatever it had. And so the best that we could do was program something, and then we'd have to just turn it off. And all that time, the 2 hours that we spent coding, you know, whatever it was that we put in there to make some little blurb on the screen would just disappear. So it was frustrating. And I know, Will, you said that you didn't have this one. You had an 800, but did you have a cassette player, or were you saving to like floppy disks?
Oh no, I was that's a floppy disk era. So that 8-bit era was floppy disk, none of that. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, the cassettes, So eventually I ended up getting, I had an Atari 800 XL. That was my third computer. So the first computer I got was a C64. I never got, my mom, this is so crazy. Mom and dad never bought me anything for it. So I literally, like my cousin, had the C64 and we were tapped out. That's all you're getting. So I couldn't save anything, couldn't do anything with it. So it was really cool. Couldn't do anything with it. I eventually got a 400. I think it was an Atari 400, and that had a cassette player. The cassette player, Neal, I feel your pain because
were you getting poorer at the time?
Yes,
like,
I was
you're going the
down.
wrong direction.
I know,
man.
I was going the absolute. But I could play a game, and I had this one game that was like, and I don't remember the name of it. But it was a dungeon crawl type game, all text based. But I still remember like having to put the tape in and then waiting and zzz, and then going back and forth until it found my program, the point that I was saved at, and then playing it. And then when you wanted to save the game, it was another, I mean, you were just waiting forever for this thing to save. And but to your point, Neal, like I feel like that hardened me, right? That was like, like made me a better man. That
you just did it. You just did it because that's what was required, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you ever see the Pocket, Trash 80 Pocket computer?
No, like portable?
It was about, for those that are watching on the video, about this big. It was approximately
Neal
about 8 inches. Yeah, 8 inches long, and only had one line of display. But you could actually do basic programming on it. And Sharp sold a version of it that I had, because again, had to wait for that paper out to make the money. But I just thought it was the coolest thing having a computer, but it only had one line of text in display, but I could make stuff appear on that one line of text. So there you go.
So you would just jack that into a television and hope that you got it all right when you hit.
Yeah, that would be great if it did. Yeah, that would be awesome if it had some sort of interface, but not so much.
Oh,
no. It was more like a glorified calculator.
Okay,
really than anything else.
Yeah,
but it's got the Z80 processor in there. So yeah.
Interesting. I was probably glorifying that way more than it actually was. All right, there's another reference in here to 4 games, and we're not gonna. I don't really have. We'll talk about these a little bit later, but he mentions there's 3 games here: Rocket 2, Bedlam, Pyramid, and Madness of the Minotaur. So the reference is a shoebox sat beside the tape drive, filled with dozens of these cassettes. Most of them were text-based adventure games. And these are the 4 games here. I don't know. The only thing is this says Pyramid 2000. I couldn't find box art for Pyramid, so I don't know if it's the same game or not. But nonetheless, we'll talk about text-based games here very soon once we get to Zork, because there's a lot of references there in that chapter. But I thought I'd just throw them up and kind of mention them. The real big game here, obviously, is Dungeons of Daggorath, which is what we're going to dive into here next. This is the reference says this is from 1982. I dug around the box until I found a cartridge with Dungeons of Daggorath printed in crooked yellow text on its worn red label. The game's artwork depicted a first-person view of a long dungeon corridor blocked by a hulking blue giant with a large stone axe. So Dungeons of Daggorath, again, 1982, came out for the Tandy exclusively. It's been called one of the very first person perspective games. It's a dungeon crawl. It was published by Tandy Corporation and was designed by a gentleman by the name of Douglas J. Morgan, and he had some assistance from 2 other people as well. I think his wife did the artwork that we're showing here as well. Like, she actually is the one that drew this out, which just kind of speaks to what things were like back then, that people were just sweat, blood, and tears, sweat equity into whatever they could to get these games out. And it was a huge success. I mean, it was received very well by critics for its graphics, the complex mazes, the game mechanics. It had things like limited visibility. You could use objects. We'll talk about the heart monitor in a little bit, the heartbeat monitor, because that was a pretty big thing as well. And then this game was really difficult, which I want to focus on the more. And we get the name for this episode coming from this game, which we'll touch on here in a second. But so we had homework. I gave you guys homework, and I said the only homework that we have for this show, really outside of doing just a general research and looking back, is I wanted you guys to try to go in and play Dungeons of Daggorath. So, and this game's free. It's available out there. We can talk about that and the story why that's available. But Will, did you play this game? How far did you get? And did you make it to the end?
So I played this game, as was the homework. There's plenty of emulators out there online to play it.
Yep.
I did that for about 3.5 minutes, and then I opened a YouTube video and watched a guy play through it. It was fantastic. Then I imagined I was at the keyboards, understanding anything that was happening.
Okay.
Then I watched a second video where a guy explained what was going on because he was dropping items to use them as defense while he was striking monsters as they were coming in. So the game to me didn't seem too intuitive, and as judgy as I was a couple episodes about people using strategy guides,
I know.
I lasted 3 minutes, went straight to YouTube.
All right, Neal, how did you fare playing Dungeons of Daggorath?
All right, I got a little further than Will, but not much further.
Like 5 minutes?
Yeah, it was interesting. I got to the point where I almost made it to the end of level 1, and there's only 3 levels in the game, and I was like, I apparently am not tolerant of this type of game anymore, right? I'm fine to hold a pine torch like any guy, but
I'll hold a pine torch with the best of them.
But see, here's the thing. Again, back then, man, this was huge, and I remember the fact that it was real time. That's the big difference, right? That it's real time. That your perspective would change. They used that hallway, bless their hearts, because they could draw that with some level of ease. Mm-hmm. But the graphics just are horrible. But you got to remember it back when it was created, right? This was huge. And the fact that the code itself was only about 8K. That's the whole thing, right? It's just written in BASIC essentially. And so you had to load it in off the cassette because there wasn't any, real floppies at that time. But you know what? The sound design, I think, is the thing that still to this day was the most impressive part of that. And so if you want to talk about the heartbeat, go for it. I won't spoil that surprise, but it was literally, that was the highlight for me, just typing look and move and turn over and over and over again. Wasn't that great now, but back then it was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right. I think if you get among game coders, just about everyone, I mean, you can go out there and look. This is in their top 10 in terms of engineering feats. What they got out of what they were working with here is the nerd equivalent to getting Apollo 13 to the moon and back, right? It's about the same of what they're trying to get this system to do. So go ahead, Albert, take it away and tell me about this heartbeat.
Oh, you want to hear about the heartbeat? Okay.
I do.
It's a song by Neil Diamond, and no, I'm kidding. It's so I've got before I do, Neal, did you? I forgot. I want to ask. Did you have this game with your candy? Or your
no, the problem was I only had 4K of RAM.
Oh, so you couldn't play this one.
I couldn't load it in. I had to play it on the school computer.
Got it. All right. Well, I've got a picture. I've got an image of the cartridge that he mentions. It is a cartridge that he puts in there. That is the first page of the instruction manual. But the heartbeat. So this was the heartbeat monitor was a flashing and like an auditory heart that was in the middle of your screen. And as enemies got closer, it would start to pulse a little bit faster. The heartbeat would start to increase. This brought on like a lot of anxiety. Like, I haven't talked about my playthrough. It's not a playthrough, first off, but it's.
I was like, go ahead.
No, I did not play through this one, but it does drive a sense of like, I guess, anxiety as you're running through these dungeons, and this heartbeat starts going faster and faster. And eventually, a lot of people credit this as to being like we think of like the hearts that we see like in Legend of Zelda or any kind of health meter or health bar. This is kind of like the first game that really took that concept, and it's been done a lot of different ways now. But yeah, and then the object of this game was, back to the heartbeat. So the more you would exhaust yourself by attacking or running through the dungeon, your heartbeat would increase. And so if you let that increase too much, there was a possibility you could just like fall unconscious and keel over, and then the monsters would start tearing into you, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but also forced perspective was like a really cool thing that we didn't talk about on this game. The idea that when your torch was new, you could see almost all the way down the hallway, and as it went dimmer and dimmer, your visibility dropped. I mean, the idea of that at this time is ridiculous.
Yeah. Hold that thought, because I actually have some screenshots that I want to show you guys, or at least put up on the display here. But I found this interesting too, and this kind of speaks to the pain that you had as a cassette player. And I'll focus on the second line here. It says, this is from the instruction manual. If you saved and loaded correctly, you will find yourself back in the exact situation you were when you saved the game. If there was a problem with the load, such as a wrong name, wrong volume setting, or a faulty or unerased tape, the game simply starts over. Like that, oh my goodness. Especially with this game, like it's a hard enough issue to deal with, right? First world problem when a video game doesn't save for whatever reason, or you forgot to do it, all that. But thinking about this, like this is just murderous. A game of this difficulty level, not saving correctly to a tape and having to wait for that thing to load up. I mean, I couldn't imagine. I didn't have this game, but I feel sorry for anybody that experiences. And then the next line just says, we recommend using Radio Shack CCR, a great way to plug their own products in the instruction manual. So, all right, I thought that was funny. Here, let me show you the screenshots. So here's the wizard. And this is kind of like the first screen. We're looking at the wizard. There's, I think, 2 wizards in the game. You got to get to the final one. But this is the message that pops up when you first start the game. It says, I dare you enter the dungeons of Daggorath. And this is what is quoted in the novel as well. There's the next screen here will show the heartbeat, which you can kind of see there in the middle. There's a little black heart. And there's the snake. And there, Will, that's what you were talking about, that forced perspective. You can see like the dotted lines means, that's a limited visibility. You can't really see all the way. Whereas the foreground here has some darker lines, which means your torch is able to go that far. This game was hard. Like it was really difficult. And I'm not even talking about the commands. Like I probably sank, I would say about 3 hours into the game.
Wow.
And I never got out of the first level. And I really was trying. I'm like, this is Ready Player One. I got this show. I got to do this for the, whatever. No, I could not get out of the first freaking level. And it wasn't the commands. Like I got really good at typing in the short commands, right? I didn't have to type everything out. But to your point, well, first off, it's not intuitive in terms of what to do. And partly because I didn't have the instruction manual. If I went to the instruction manual, it actually tells you how to play the game. I was just like, I'm going to pick this up and just start playing. No, it is not one of those games. It's not even like it's kind of a mixture of like a text-based game with a graphical interface. Is probably the best way to explain that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you had no idea what you had to have in your, or not so much in your inventory, but what you had to hold at certain times to be able to either pick up other things. And so it's this complete trial and error. That's all it was.
Yeah, it was. And then that's what I felt like. I felt like I was just trying everything. And then sometimes it felt like I was typing in the commands and I couldn't tell, like, all right, did I hit him? Is this thing taking damage? I really wasn't aware. It was just, there was a lot of anxiety playing this game. And it was, again, the one word that came to mind was it's just very difficult. And so we named the show, the name of the show actually comes from whenever you die, the wizard would come up and taunt you and say, yet another does not return. This show had a totally different title before yesterday when I finally threw in the towel and said, I'm done with this game, and went back and renamed it Yet Another Does Not Return, because that was just something I heard and saw quite a bit as playing it. The screen that I've got up right now is the last screen. This is actually the screen, and it was very hard to find anybody that had completed this stinking game so I could get a screenshot of the wizard saying, behold, destiny awaits the hand of a new wizard, which is what Parzival sees in the novel once he completes the game. I don't know what else there is to say about this game. I thought it was very cool. I really like it. I'm not done with the game. I think I'm going to go back and still try to play. Like my mission right now is just to get through level 1. I'm not trying to get to the second wizard or level 3 or any of that stuff. I just want to try to be able to play this and say that I could at least get out of level 1. But I guess any final thoughts before we move on from Dungeons of Daggorath from you, Mr. Neal?
The thing that I loved was in the book. This is what Halliday claims is this video game is what made him want to be a game designer, right? So I can see that in the kids of that day, that this was unlocking something that had never been done before, like Will said, right?
Yeah.
The perspective on the top with the commands at the bottom, very different game experience. And I could see how that would ignite the imagination of somebody who has never seen anything like it. We have so much more now that still inspires kids to want to be game designers, but this was it. This was the pinnacle of achievement at the day.
Well, there's a cheat code you can put in, right, that makes you invulnerable if you want to try.
Yeah,
that.
there's so if you're looking at the completion time of this game, it's on average about 16 hours, right? So Albert, you're almost there.
I'm nowhere.
You're 13 hours away. Just keep on trucking. Don't even bother saving to tape. But
like I said, I got reasonable, realistic goals. It's only level 1. I could not. I'm right there, but no, sorry, go ahead.
So there are cheat codes to the game, but even on like speed run playthroughs, it's like 4 hours.
Oh, it's a long game. It's fun though. I will say this: it was fun. Like it made me. I know I'm frustrated, and I kind of I gave up. But like to your point, Neil, if this was all I had, oh yeah, I would have. This is all I would have done, and I would have challenged myself to kind of push through and
And the
this
heartbeat
thing.
monitor kept you engaged. I mean, it really, really did. It caused that sense of panic, like something's really, really happening. Otherwise, you would have tossed it away way earlier.
Yeah. Interesting. The last thing before we leave of this, Douglas J. Morgan, the guy that created this, he actually released this out there, and that's why it's emulated. There's Microsoft has it for download. It's available just about everywhere. There's even a web version that you can just play on a web browser. But an interesting story there is the original license that was set up between him and Tandy Tandy. It said that basically they own this rights to the game so long as the game was being produced. And well, fast forward to whatever time, he realized that hey, they're no longer producing this game. So I think he took it to his lawyers and said, "Yep, you're out of the contract. It technically belongs to you." And so, as a favor to everybody that made this game such a success, he turned that license out. And there's this really great letter, which we don't have time. I copied in the notes because I want to read some of it. But he wrote this letter basically to everyone saying, "Thank you. This is now your game. You're more than welcome to do this. Whatever, put it out there in any form that you want. Just please keep it true to the original game so that other people can enjoy it as much as you did." So it was a really cool gesture, a kind gesture that he did. And it's what allowed all of us to play the game. It's just really hard. Okay, we're going to talk about Conan the Barbarian. And we could do and I was really going back and forth between what do I want to end the show on? Do I want to end the show on Conan or do I want to end it on Footloose? I settled for Footloose.
You've made the mistake.
I know, I probably did. Because there's so much to talk about here. But let's talk about Conan. So this is a movie that came out in 1982, directed by John Milius, written by John Milius, and Oliver Stone, which I did not know that he was had a hand in this. And this was these were characters by an author by the name of Robert E. Howard. It's starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Darth Vader, and Mako. The premise is Conan is a sword and sorcery film about a boy who seeks seeks revenge after his father is killed and his mother is beheaded at the hands of a cannibal cult leader and sorcerer named Thulsa Doom. He grows to be a barbarian and befriends a thief named Subutai, a female warrior, Valeria, who he falls in love with. Conan nearly dies about midway through the movie, but is saved by his warrior girlfriend, his other friend there, his thief friend, and a wizard that's, again, played by Mako. With his new life, Conan and his friends raid a temple that belongs to Thulsa Doom. They rescue the princess and escape, but not before Thulsa kills Valeria with a snake arrow. Conan and his friends make preparations for a vengeful attack by Thulsa and his army, fend them off, and at the end, Conan exacts revenge on Thulsa Doom by beheading him in front of all of his followers. I wrote all that out. I didn't practice it, and then I realized I should just be pulling these from IMDb because they do a much better job. But anyways, this is I've seen this movie. I can't even tell you how many times I've seen this movie. But I will say this, and well, I'm going to kick it off with you first. I did not, in all my viewings, I don't think I ever watched the version that had as much skin as the actual release. Like, I must have watched this movie a billion times and only seen it on national television. Because when I was watching this, I'm like, what in the world? I don't remember any of these scenes. I don't remember this much skin on the show. But how many times, I know you quote this movie a lot and you do it at will, no pun intended. But where is this rank for you? Was this one of your all-time favorites?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's one of my all-time favorites because really it launched the dynasty that would be Arnold Schwarzenegger. So, Neal, have you seen this movie 100 times at least?
I don't know if it's 100, but it's up there. There's only so many times that I can handle the dialogue.
Oh, let's play hey, we haven't had a guest before. Let's play a quick game of trivia. I'm going to throw out some trivia questions about Conan the Barbarian. Listeners can play at home between you and Albert. And let's see how much you guys know about this movie. All right, here we go. It's going to be quick. There's only going to be 3 questions because I know we're getting short on time. All right, 3 questions. Here we go. Best out of 3. Question 1. Where was this movie filmed at? What's the filming location for Conan the Barbarian?
Filming location? It looks like a California beach, but I may be wrong.
Okay, no, California?
It was somewhere in Eastern Europe. No, Spain. Spain.
Oh, look at the big brain on Neal. So, yes, he's correct on both counts. Originally, it was supposed to be filmed in Yugoslavia, but because, well, I don't know if you know the 80s in Yugoslavia, they were having issues.
They were having problems at the time.
And it wasn't just the Yugo, so they moved the filming to Spain, just outside of Madrid. Oh, good job. 1 point to Neal. This is only going to be 2 questions if he gets them both right. Question 2. How many minutes into the film before Conan says his first line? Approximately. Closest to the real number will get the point.
23.
I'm gonna go longer. I'm gonna say 31.
It's 21. Congratulations, Albert. You will get a bonus point if you can tell me what his line is. I will give you the line that is given. I will feed you, Conan, your line. Here we go. Tell us, Conan, what is best in life?
Keep CROM and crush your enemies, see them something of another.
To crush your enemies, to see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of their women.
Women, yeah. That's
nice. Okay, I'm giving it to Neal. Neal
fair.
wins.
No, he wins.
Although
He
both of
knew it.
those Schwarzenegger accents were terrible, and I know you both have one, so I'm
I
disappointed.
cheated. I cheated, and I'll show you why in a second. But keep going. That's the end. That was a good. That's good. I enjoyed that. Thank you, Neal. Good showing there.
Thanks.
So let's
useful knowledge.
Yeah, I know. Let's talk about the movie just in general. Like, first off, the opening is like super powerful. Like the music in this movie, and that's really kind of the reference here. Did I skip over the reference? I think I mentioned it. But the reference really is kind of talking about the music playing while he's playing Dungeons of Daggorath. The soundtrack comes on at one point, and it is very iconic, which I want to dig into just a little bit here in 1 second. But that coupled with Mako, which I am a huge fan of Mako. I think everything he does is amazing. He's got a great voice, and his narration, like that voiceover at the very beginning, like really kind of puts you in that mood. And you're like, whoa, what's going on here? He really kind of captures you. But
that was supposed to be Arnold Schwarzenegger in the script. It's Arnold giving a first-person rendition.
Yeah, I can see why they changed that one.
Yeah, he had a little English issue.
Yeah, and throughout the movie itself, like there's moments where it's a little bit slower, but it never feels like it's just like boring to me. And I may be looking through that with like rose-colored tinted glasses kind of thing, but I've always enjoyed the movie. And the other things that stand out for me, like my other favorite moments are, when he punches the camel. Like I don't know. There's a story there. Hopefully you guys have it. I don't know if that was just improvised or whatever, but him punching a camel was obviously pretty cool. I talked about Mako, all his grunts and all the murmuring that he does in the movie is just phenomenal. I never thought I'd say that about anybody. Arnold on the beach, that scene.
I thought I was the only one.
Yeah, right. But Arnold, when he's on the beach, or Conan, I should say, when he's on the beach and he's got the sword and he's going through that whole thing and the camera work there and the music that's playing, it's a really cool, iconic moment. I can't tell how many times that I've always loved that particular scene. Valeria's scene or line of "Do you want to live forever?" She says that like 3 or 4 times throughout the movie, and then you get the big reveal at the very end that she's come back from wherever she was to protect Conan. And then obviously the beheading at the very end, I thought as a kid was like, oh my gosh, that's really cool. Like,
yeah, but it was really anticlimactic, though. I mean,
it really does. Yeah.
I would have liked to have had a little bit more of a fight before he sliced off. We all knew he was going to win. I mean, that wasn't a problem. But I have to agree with you that the soundtrack was just absolutely amazing. Done by Basil. What was the guy's name? Basil.
Polidorus?
Mickey
Polidorus.
Basil.
Yeah. But it was beautiful. And the French horns and the drum beats and like all that stuff was really good. I think they just finally released it like as a standalone, box set just for the soundtrack recently. Because it's a beautiful part of the film. Yeah. Regardless of the dialogue and the skin.
It's like uplifting at times. It's like gentle when it needs to be gentle. It's very fierce when it needs to be fierce.
Are you describing me? Calm down.
Yeah, that's it.
No, not at all.
Dang it.
Anyways, there was a lot of stuff in here that I want to talk about, and we just don't have the time to do it. But I did have a couple other things here. This is where I cheated. So on the left-hand side here, I'm showing the Japanese poster, which I thought was kind of cool. They always have better posters, in my opinion. But then on the right, I found this. It says, keep CROM and crush your enemies. See them driven before you hear the lamentation of their women. This is like keep calm and do whatever, right? It's kind of a play on that, which I thought was pretty funny. And then someone actually went out and made this one. I don't know what this is. I just thought it was hilarious. This CROM laughs at your 4 wins. And this is the conversation that, him and Subutai are having when they're sitting there talking about the gods and who they worship. And he makes that comment about, CROM laughs at your 4 wins. And I'm not doing a good Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation, but anyways, there's some good stuff here. Any other, I guess, what are your favorite moments, Will?
Yeah, I would say the snake arrow scene is like when they're all cammied up and they're like putting on the black paint. So I did a combat patrol as a canine handler in the neutral zone between Cuba and the U.S. Back in the 90s. And I did my camo paint that way before we went into the field. So awesome. It's epic. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. Neal, how about you? Any favorite moments, stand-up moments?
I mean, other than punching the camel, I mean, really? No, I liked when basically some of the really long shots, because it was just beautifully constructed. I as much as I don't think it's a super high quality film, they did some really great things with it, right? The practical effects were fantastic, but some of those scenes, like especially with that cult at one point, having all those folks walking up to the castle, like just beautiful scenes all the way through. So,
yeah, it had a really grandiose kind of a feel to it too, especially the movies that were out at the time. And
brought me revenge.
Yeah. The line that he says to CROM about when he's like, I've never prayed to you before, and well, then you can go to hell. That's a great line.
That is
Arnold.
a great line.
There's
last trivia question for you two. Can either of you name an actor who turned down the role of Conan the Barbarian?
Turned it down?
There's 2 actors who turned this.
I'm going to guess Lou Ferrigno, given the time.
Wow.
No?
Mm-mm.
Oh,
negative.
Negative. Okay. All right. And with that, move on. No.
Neal looks like he's stumped. Got nothing. So maybe somebody out there in Radioland has actually stumped our Gunters here. But here we go. Charles Bronson and Sylvester Stallone both turned this role down. And the only reason they got Sylvester Stallone is he was doing a presser for his Pumping Iron movie. And they saw him and they said his body type was perfect. Yeah. Turns out when he got the role, he was too big. He couldn't properly wield a sword.
To slim down.
Yeah, to slim down in order to take the role.
He does pretty good. I heard that story too, and I was watching and trying to really pay close attention to how he did, and I thought his form looked pretty good. So,
yeah. Well, he trained for 3 months, 2 hours with an actual broadsword. In order to do that, he learned climbing techniques. He did his own stunts throughout the movie because he couldn't find a stunt double that could replicate his body physique.
Right.
True story. No. Sometimes when I'm saying this these synapses are firing in my head, I feel like Cliff Clavin. Like I'm just, little known fact about Conan here.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's why we keep you on the show. But it's another great movie. And one thing that I would say that this spawned was a number of video games too that came out during the 80s. And I've got a couple of that I'm showing here, like Rastan, Black Tiger, which is huge in Ready Player One world. We'll talk about that at some point here. Golden Axe, Gauntlet. I mean, this is just a small portion. I mean, there were games called Barbarians. I remember even in Dungeons and Dragons, there were when this movie came out, and especially when Conan the Destroyer was out, the Barbarian class became a really big thing. No pun intended. People were there was the Unearthed Arcana had come out that gave us a whole another level of expansion of rules and how to play them. They kind of pulled a lot of that stuff from the Dragon magazine, but nonetheless, Barbarians were kind of a really cool thing. And this spawned, and we've talked about this many times, but it really spawned a series of really bad 80s, sword and sorcery flicks that came out from this point. And again, I'll plug it. If you get a chance, if you're up late at night, turn on Amazon Prime, go look. They've got an extensive collection of really terrible sword and sorcery movies free to watch if you're a Prime member.
That's exactly what I thought of when Neal was saying, man, I really would have wished there was a better fight. And I immediately went to Jack Palance in my head and was like, are you sure? Are you sure you want to see that? I'm cool with the beheading. Let's move on. We'll save the big fight for the thing with the horn.
Oh, that's from the Destroyer. Yeah.
Yeah.
You do what you want. I ride with Conan.
Let's end on Footloose.
Chewbacca.
Okay, we got to stop him. We'll just keep going here. Let's talk about Footloose from 1984. The references, the place reminded me a lot of the town in the movie Footloose. Small, rural, and sparsely populated. The houses all seemed incredibly big and were placed ridiculously far apart. This movie was directed by Herbert Ross. It starred that guy from Friday the 13th, Kevin Bacon.
Mm-hmm.
The other pride of Corpus Christi, Lori Singer. You know she's from Corpus Christi, Texas?
I did, because I read the show notes.
No,
It's right there.
Okay. The mom from The Lost Boys and the dad from Harry and the Hendersons, as well as Matthew Broderick's wife. They're all in this movie. Great flick. The tagline, and you can kind of see here in the poster that I've got, the tagline was, he's a big city kid in a small town. They said he'd never win. He knew he had to. I mean, that's like so cheesy. And then it's got a subcontext that says the music is on his side. I mean, man, that's some pretty serious stuff here. But just quickly, Footloose is about a 17-year-old teenage boy who moves from Chicago to Oklahoma to live with his aunt and uncle. He finds himself in a town where drinking, smoking, rock and roll, and dancing are all frowned upon, if not prohibited. After finding it terribly difficult to fit in and make friends, he eventually finds a farm boyfriend, a girlfriend, and successfully convinces the town that music and dance are not the devil's work, and it's okay to party, like he says at the very end.
Wow. Hey, did you write that?
I did.
Because I like the way you put, and then he found a farm boyfriend and a girlfriend.
Yeah.
Whoa, this is a progressive film.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go
probably,
check it out. How loose are these feet? What's happening?
All right. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure we've all seen Footloose. So I guess Neal, give me just some of your favorite moments. I want to keep this, I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but what are some of your favorite moments from the movie?
I mean, come on, the montage of teaching Willard how to dance.
Yep.
That's got to go down pretty
Let's
good.
hear it for the boy.
Even my 13-year-old watching it with me thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
But then there's also the that moment between Ren and Ariel in the Volkswagen right after he does the big super angry dance, gymnastics thing.
Yeah.
She comes up and she's like, don't you want to kiss me? And he just really nails her as far as really understanding who she is versus what she's trying to project. And to see the change on her face,
Yep.
to go from this confident, I know what's going on, I'm tempting you, et cetera, to, wow, you really do understand, or, I am not a small town girl type of thing. Just watching her go through that transformation is pretty great. But then also the dance kick fight at the end is pretty awesome when he's using his dance moves to battle what's it, Chuck or whatever his name is.
Whatever his name was, yep.
Come on. That's a beautiful thing.
Page right out of the 80s movies.
That's right.
Will, what about you? What were some of your finer moments here? And by the way, this is probably Lori Singer's best movie she's ever done.
Oh, bar none.
Yeah.
So my favorite scene is when he goes to city council and he's like, and it was King David, who we read about in Samuel. And what did David do? And he's flipping through the Bible. And he's like, David danced before the Lord with all his might, leaping and dancing before the Lord, leaping and dancing.
And then he mic drops. It's basically a mic drop.
He's done it. He got him. He dropped the Samuel on them. That's one of my favorite parts. And then I think you guys nailed all the best parts. I'm not going to sit here and lie and pretend like I haven't Kevin Bacon danced aerobics in a garage before, probably in my 20s. I'm not even going to say that hasn't happened.
Right.
That is the best scene ever. And I will have you know, I cannot find that song out of all the songs on the soundtrack. And I'm sure you're going to talk about this great soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot find that song in a karaoke version, or I would do it.
Really? I wonder why that is. Usually that's the first thing that gets released. Or that's usually not the song.
No, not Footloose. When he's doing his gymnastics routine.
I meant karaoke
find
songs in general seem like they come out pretty quick. But yeah, that's interesting. So some of the other scenes we didn't talk about, the credits, the opening credits. I'd love the feet dancing and we've got Kenny Loggins playing. I mean, that's a great song in itself, but I thought that was really cool. It's very reminiscent of the 80s, especially when you see their attire, what they're wearing there. The chicken, playing chicken with the tractors was always really cool to watch.
That's great. That's a good call. That's good.
You mentioned the dancing montage. That's probably the big standout moment. But then the very end too is just all that dancing that was going on, and then just the inclusion of breakdancing, right? Because if you think about the time, this is 1984. That was really when breakdancing was starting to peak. I mean, and seeing that in a movie for me was exciting because I was like probably all of us, we were all trying to break dance, and this was a new dance that was out. But seeing that one dude break dance
Popping
in
and
the movie,
locking.
popping and
That's
locking
right.
was awesome to watch. And the soundtrack, I mean, we've already mentioned it, but it is one of my favorites. Like this, when I think about my cassette player and the tapes that I did have growing up in the 80s, this is one of the ones that was a legitimate copy that I got. It wasn't a flea market brand. It wasn't something I copied off a dual tape deck or anything like that. This was actually a real copy that I got. I didn't buy it. Somebody gave it to me. I don't know if it was a gift or whatever else, but it was one of the few cassettes I had, and I played it constantly. We should note also, he's got a Walkman, an oversized Walkman in the movie poster here. And we're talking about some of these moments, and I meant to click on so we could kind of show it. But here's some of those moments that we talked about. There's
Oh,
your
that soundtrack was incredible.
Yeah.
Both what was on the official soundtrack, and then they used a bunch of extra songs actually in the film that weren't on the soundtrack because they were used by permission. But it was solid all the way around.
Yeah, we had Kenny Loggins doing Footloose. Denise Williams, Let's Hear It for the Boy. That was a massive song, right? Even independent of the movie, it's just a great song. Holding Out for a Hero, Bonnie Tyler. The Dancing in the Sheets, that's the one they're doing at the
car
parlor, whatever that is. Everybody's jumping out of the cars. That's
drive-in.
the drive-in. That's what it was. That's a great one. Never is the song that you were talking about, Will.
Yes.
Never.
I just put a link to the karaoke version of that in the chat there.
Did you,
Will.
Send it over to me?
I did. I put it in the private chat there. It's right.
I'll be back in 4 minutes, gentlemen.
Yeah, he's got to go download it.
He's gonna go warm up.
That's right.
Our buddy that we talked about, so Bang Your Head from Quiet Riot. That's kind of the ones you mentioned, Neal. That was the song he was playing when he was heading to school. That eventually got. That
was a cop scene, right?
No, that was when he was driving into school for the first day.
They may have reused it then as well.
That's true. I don't remember them playing music when they were, because I think they were talking about Men at Work.
What did he get pulled over for listening to? Remember, he had his radio on too loud.
I don't recall now.
Was it? Oh man, what's the name of it? Was it Quiet Riot? Maybe.
Well, that's when we're talking about Bang Your Head.
That's the one. Yeah.
I don't remember, but I know Mellencamp was on here. It's So Good was actually what was played in the movie. It wasn't on the original release, but that was in there as well. There's a great. So I own, and I'm not even going to kid here. I've got this movie on VHS. I still have it on VHS. I've got it on Blu-ray, DVD, and I have the digital version. I don't know why I have so many copies. I really enjoy this movie, but clearly, there's a great not a documentary, but a audio commentary with Kevin Bacon that you can watch. It's actually pretty good. Like, and I say most of them generally are those auditory commentaries, but this one actually is it's actually pretty good. And he gives a lot of information about how he got the role and what things were like. And I learned a lot of things about where this was filmed. It was actually filmed in Provo, Utah.
Payson.
Yeah, it was like two. I think it was two places they were doing bits and pieces of it there. And a lot of what we see in the movie was actually kind of what was happening. He mentions that it was art imitating reality and reality imitating art while that was going on. And he went so far as the producers actually got him enrolled in one of the schools. So he was like 24 years old at the time, and he got enrolled as a 17-year-old there at the high school. And in his head, when he was reading the script that first day of school, he had it played out in his mind that he was going to be kind of strutting. I think he mentions that he was going to do his John Travolta strut as he was going through the hallways. Mm-hmm. When he actually went to the school, it's very much what we saw in the movie, where his head was down because he was worried that people are just going to punch him because they were looking at him weird because of how he was dressed and all that. Mm-hmm. So it's fascinating to me as a huge fan of the movie, just what he went through and the things that he went through and just the production of it all. So, and there's actually two audio commentaries. There's one with just Kevin Bacon, and then there's others with the general director and all that as well. So both are actually really good, and you kind of get different things from both of them.
So the same year this movie came out, Breaking the Movie came out, which is another exceptional film. It came out 4 months later. So yeah, it may be in the same universe. You don't know. Like once they graduated high school, somebody went off, joined the dance academy, met some dudes on the street and started breaking. A little Turbo Ozone action.
Yeah, it may be true. Let's see. Do I have anything else here? I don't think I think it was pretty much.
I mean, it's based on a true story, right?
Yeah.
Is it really?
It's one that came out of Oklahoma, and Dean Pitchford, the writer, and the guy that actually wrote a lot of the lyrics for many of the songs, including the song Footloose. heard about this story and actually went out and interviewed a bunch of, kids in that particular town and high school to kind of get a feel for what actually happened, and then ended up writing the script based on a lot of those interviews. So it was kind of amazing how much Pitchford, not being the director, had in shaping really what took place on the screen.
Yeah,
hey, Albert, if I haven't mentioned it already, I like this Neal guy. You should keep him here. I like him.
There's, I do
Thanks,
too.
man.
Yeah, there's, Elmore. So I had it in my notes, but I didn't have as much detail as you did. I just had that it was Elmore City, Oklahoma, where dancing had been banned since 1898, which I thought was crazy that there was no dancing until those true life events happened. The other worthless trivia I picked up was Tom Cruise and Rob Lowe.
And dancing.
Oh, thank you. There's the movie quote. Tom Cruise and Rob Lowe were also considered for the part of Ren, and Daryl Hannah and Madonna were also considered for the role of Ariel at one point. So there you go. Okay, well, that's the last thing. But before we go, I've got a little game that we're going to play. It won't take long. So we mentioned Lori Singer, right?
Yep.
And Lori Singer is from Corpus Christi. Yeah. So Corpus Christi is, for those of you who don't know, is a kind of a beach town, pretty big town, southeast of where most of us live. And there are actually surprisingly a lot of actors that have come out of Corpus Christi. Will and I are both from San Antonio. So I thought we'd play this game where I'm going to ask each of you, I'm going to put up a picture of a famous actor. I'm going to ask you, are they from San Antonio or are they from Corpus Christi? And together, you guys can work on this. There's a total of 12 people that I'm going to put up here. I'm asking that you try to get at least 8 of these correct in order to win the game. Everybody, you got that? The rules clear?
No, I don't even. I forgot what we're doing. That's Lori Singer. I'll take swords for 100, Alex.
That's S swords for 100. Okay.
Penis mightier.
That pen is mightier. Okay, there's 12 actors. Let's see. Will, I'm going to give you the first one here. Oh, okay, wait, time out.
It's a team competition. Did we accept?
It's a team competition, but I'm going to ask you first.
Okay, it's Lori Singer.
No, not that. Hold on. And they're not all actors. Sorry, there's some politicians. So here we go. The first one is this gentleman. This is Lyndon B. Johnson. Was he born in San Antonio or born in Corpus Christi?
Corpus Christi.
Corpus Christi.
He's born in San Antonio.
We spent a lot of time in Three Rivers. Actually set up a lot of bilingual schools there. There's an interesting
Cliff. Keep it in the pants there, buddy. All right, here we go to the next one. Mr. Neal, this is Dabney Coleman. This is actually a scene out of War Games. Corpus Christi or San Antonio?
I'm going to have to say San Antonio.
Corpus Christi.
Dang it.
Yes.
I didn't think statistically you would do that.
See, my thing, I would have picked it too because Cloak and Dagger was filmed here.
San Antonio?
Yeah, and you would just think.
That's what swayed me.
That would have swayed me.
Okay, so hold that thought, Gunters, because we're going to come back to Cloak and Dagger here in just one second. All right. Here's Will. This is for you. This is Jesse Borrego from Blood In, Blood Out, which I know is a big movie for you growing up as a kid.
Do your job, man.
There you go. Here come the lines from Blood In, Blood Out. Okay. Jesse Borrego, is he from San Antonio or Corpus Christi? Whoa. Sorry.
San Antonio.
Yeah,
San Antonio?
Yeah, San Antonio.
Yeah, that's right. You got one right. There we go. We're on a roll. All right. Neal, you probably saw it, but this is Summer Glau. She was in Firefly. Yep. I think she was in the Terminator TV show, Serenity. Yep. San Antonio or Corpus Christi?
Oh, definitely San Antonio.
San Antonio is correct. Good job.
Wow.
All right, Will. I think you might know who she is.
I know this one.
I do.
Farrah Fawcett.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody had this poster growing up in the 70s.
Got the Funko Pop.
San Antonio or Corpus Christi?
Corpus Christi.
Corpus
Christi is correct. Yep. All right. Neal is a softball man. This is Selena.
Oh,
that's Corpus Christi.
Corpus Christi. Yeah. All right. You got that.
How did you get that? That doesn't look anything like J-Lo.
Living my life right. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Brought up right. All right. Well, this is yours. This is Ollie North. You remember him? He was big in the 80s.
I do. He was actually at Congress talking about us arming the Nicaraguans as part of the anti-Sandinista Contra.
Whatever, buddy. Corpus Christi or San Antonio?
San Antonio.
San Antonio is correct. That's 4. All right, so we'd come back to Cloak and Dagger, and I'm not talking about E.T. here.
I know this
is a picture of Henry Thomas. Henry Thomas, is he from San Antonio or Corpus Christi?
I'm going to say San Antonio.
That's right. He is the pride of San Antonio, if you ask.
Just outside of San Antonio.
Yeah, that's true. But in some circles, this is all San Antonio's ever done. Okay.
Hey, that's another Cloak and Dagger reference. Him and Dabney Coleman got to get a couple Texas boys making a movie. Terrible movie.
That's right. Right as they expected. All right, well, here's a softball one for you. This is Eva Longoria. San Antonio or Corpus Christi?
San Antonio.
Oh, Corpus Christi.
I don't know. Look, you know how many, I know for the rest of the world, Eva Longoria, she's gorgeous. But this is Texas. So this is the model we make. Right. As a factory, we're producing tons of these.
Very nice. True. That is very, very true. Okay. This is Neal's Michelle Rodriguez, who was in Lost and Avatar.
San Antonio
or Corpus Christi. San Antonio's right. That's 5. We've only got 2 answers, so there's no way you can win this game. But Will, your next one is Lou Diamond Phillips. San Antonio or Corpus Christi? This is him from La Bamba.
Not my Richie. What the heck? Oh, Corpus.
Corpus Christi is correct. Corpus Christi wins. All right. And last one. Man, you guys came so close. Neal, if you can bring it home on this last one here.
It's Mark Singer. It's Lori's brother. Look, it's Corpus Christi.
Look, this is the second. What is this? 2 out of the last 3 weeks. Albert has had a picture of Mark Singer in a loincloth.
Well, he's got a fine physique. I don't know.
Yeah, besides V, right? He only did Beastmaster.
Yeah, that was the only other thing he really did.
Oh, so. That's a great series.
Well, you guys almost got it. I mean, you were that close to getting 8. You got 7 out of the 12. So
if it makes you feel better, I guessed on at least half of mine, and I didn't even know some of those folks were from Texas. That game could have been called "Are they from Texas or anywhere else?" I would have performed just as well.
It's just as well. Yeah, that's probably fair. Well, that's going to bring it to an end. Wow, we kept this under 2 hours. I can't believe we did that. That's quite a feat for us. So before we go, thanks for everybody who joined the live show. I know there were a number of people that popped in, popped out, said hello. So thank you guys for doing that. This show will be out next week as a podcast. I'll add in all the special effects and sounds and everything, so it's a little bit different than what you watched tonight. If you guys like to follow us, you can certainly do that on any of the podcast catchers that you can find. Our shows are generally on Thursday nights where we do the live shows, so please come back and join us there. Neal, you're our guest. Before we go, any final words from you about anything we've talked about or just in general at this point?
You know what? I absolutely love this podcast series. And Albert, thank you for cranking it back up here in 2020. It's not like you had anything else going on, but
right, yeah.
It's besides the point. I truly do love it. This is one of my favorite books and love what you do here. I still can't believe all the research that you do for these episodes, but keep doing it.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Well, maybe we'll bring you back. I guess Will likes you. So,
no, man, that was outstanding. That was a lot of fun. I get tired of talking to you all the time. We've been talking to each other since we were like 12.
It's 20 years, actually. In just a few months, it'll be 20 years that we've known each other.
Who? Me and you? No way. You stood in my wedding, and this is my 25th anniversary.
Okay, then 30
Calm
years.
down there.
Sorry, 30 years.
What?
My math
I didn't
is way
get
off.
married 5 years before I met. Oh, are we pretending we're young? Is that what we're doing here? Okay. All right. Class of 2000. Let's take it away.
I'm actually disappointed you didn't change your background. You kept it Kmart the entire time. It says a lot about you.
Like Kmart. It's safe. I'm sorry I didn't have a shirtless picture of Mark Singer to throw in the background.
Yeah.
I'd have my head right around his crutch.
Okay. And with that, we'll call it. So, all right. We'll see you guys next week when we hit chapter 11. And thanks for being here. See you guys.
The views and opinions of the Basement hosts are of our own and are not in any way affiliated with Random House or Ernest Klein. All quotes, music, sounds, trademarked, and copyrighted material referenced in the show are owned by the respectful companies and creators and are used by the Basement as fair use for entertainment purposes only. It would take me a month to read this whole disclaimer, but sad to say, I don't have that kind of time.